or propose that 10 things make it to the ballot. So I think we need to kind of elevate up and make sure that we're prioritizing. So we need to make sure we get plenty of input. We need to make sure we have plenty of discussion. We need to work to build consensus. Then we need to prioritize that to ultimately come together with what our report of this full body would be that we would all be willing to submit to the city commission for their consideration. So I throw that out there as one person's description of how the process might work, but I would ask for others to weigh in if that sounds like the right way to kind of think about how we're going to conduct our meetings.
Sounds
Anyone?
good to me.
Well, having sat on a lot of other boards, that pretty much defines it. Great.
Okay, great. And then on the public input, one of the things I was thinking about to put is if we did that at the beginning of the meeting, so that the people that came would have an opportunity to speak and not have to kind of, if they had to go and go somewhere else, they would know predictably they could come at the start of the meeting. And then that would also, we would ask that the comments be around the subject matter that's before the body that day. And we would benefit from that input in real time because that would be part of our discussion. We allow them to speak first as our guests at the meeting, and then we would limit the commentary to 3 minutes so that we can have everyone would be able to have their say, and that it would be informational and not conversational. In other words, we'll be the listeners and we'll take in the information. We can ask clarifying questions, but it's not intended to be a conversation or a debate. Does that sound like a fair way to manage making sure we get public input?
I agree.
Yes.
No.
Okay?
Duff?
Yes.
Will there be an opportunity for them to follow up with a comment at the end of the meeting over the discussion or issues that were brought up?
Yeah, I think that, you know, if that's appropriate, of course. I mean, we want to make sure that this is about the city and the residents in the city. We're their representatives, and we're trying to bring that viewpoint forward. And so, as appropriate, we want to make sure that we facilitate that.
Thank you.
Okay? All right. So, as far as process goes, you know, is there anything else that anyone wants to offer, or did I, as Mr. Burquest kind of suggested, did I lay out the basics? And I just want to make sure we're all working from the same playbook. And if not, the other point here is we started out our last meeting and the as far as voting and building a consensus, I just want to lay this out as what we were instructed is that we're working off a standard of a majority of the body. Meaning that there's 14 of us on here, so it takes 8 people to have a majority, regardless of who's showed up at the meeting or not. We need to reach 8 in order to pass something on. And so I just want to put that out there so that we're all working off the same set of metrics as we have our discussion. Is everybody kind of agreeable that that's how we did it and that's how we will do it? Okay. Okay. All right, so I think those are the bases. I'm sure along the way we'll figure out that we've missed something here, but at least yes.
I just was wondering who would be in charge of kind of the social media aspect, or I guess the media, not social, as far as like talking to the newspapers and things like that. Were we going to have the agendas released ahead of time, or how that was going to work? From what I reviewed in the past, it looks like there was a person selected who was kind of in charge of that media. And I wondered if we were going to do the same or how we were going to go about that process.
So I'm going to ask Clerk Kresser to tell us about posting the materials and so forth. And so that's all going to be taken care of by you, or?
Sure. Yes, Mr. Chairman. So I will send out notices to normally what I do for any press release or agenda for the city commission. They will also be posted on our website. The link that I sent you to the page that was created for the Charter Review Committee. The minutes, once they're approved, will also be uploaded to that website. I don't usually distribute those to anyone other than members, but anyone that asks for them, they're public records, so they would be able to obtain them. And as far as a spokesperson, I would really say that that's up to you as a group to decide, and Duff, you as the chairman.
Yeah.
To decide.
Yeah, so what I would say about that is, to the extent that what you just described is we're going to have very much transparency. People can get the information and go. I think that if I look at that, we would be responding to clarify things. And so I think that would fall to me as the chairman of the committee to make sure that we did that. And then it would also be on me to make sure that any statements that we would make were reflective of what everybody around here, around the table thought. So that's the kind of the way I would handle that so that we have a consistent message. But that's a really good point. Anything else along those lines? All right. If not, and if something does come up, feel free to interrupt and make sure that we cover it. So tonight, what we said we were going to do is we were going to cover the charter sections 1 through 16, which are include the powers of the city, the form of government, and the city commission. And so, sticking with what we started, I think that to start out, and then we'll see how we work together as a group, we can just go kind of item by item. And I think as we go item by item, maybe we follow, the first thing would be to say on the item, has anyone around the table received feedback from the community on that item that they want to bring forward on behalf of people that have talked to them or brought something else, or brought something up? Their own view, your own view of it. Is there further information that we'll need to help make the decision? And then any kind of changes or updates that you might want to recommend, and then we'll go from there. So, in keeping with what we stated before, we do have an audience participant here, and I didn't know if you wanted to address us or not, but if you would, now would be the time. And
Absolutely.
you can speak on anything from 1 to 16, and we'll observe a 3-minute time frame, and you can come back.
Starting
at other
now.
meetings.
Starting now.
Go.
You need a name and address first, right? Tim Schwanger, 362 Sheffield Way. I've been coming to city commission meetings probably for 30 years of my life. I'm not going to tell you my age, but it's been at least 30 years coming down here. This is the second stint as far as coming down for charter review every 5 years. So thank you for allowing the public to comment. In the past, they've always allowed the public to comment, so appreciate that opportunity. One of the things I would advise, based on my past experience with charter review, is that there's going to be some hot topics, obviously, and one of them is going to be the form of government. Currently, there's still some talk out in the community about maybe going to a ward system, not necessarily a strong mayor, but at least a ward system so that the entire city of Sandusky is represented by the Sandusky City Commission. What I would suggest is that what they've done in the past, they've actually had experts in the field of both forms of government. I think both of them were PhD doctors that had some kind of degree in political science or something to that effect. Have both sides come in and talk to this group, explain a little bit about the benefits, the pros, the cons of both forms of government, and then make your decision based on that or your own observations from maybe from other communities that have different types of that form of government. The other thing would be the qualifications, which is item number 4. I think that needs to maybe be kind of cleaned up as far as conflicts of interests with the Sandusky City Commission. There's been incidences in the past where city commissioners have bid and received public contracts through the city and received tax dollars for those bids. And according to our charter right now, it says they can't do that, but it doesn't give a clear, concise answer to how that would be handled as far as them being disqualified from being a Sandusky City Commissioner or any type of penalty in that regard. So that's something else that you might want to try to shore up a little bit. Thank you. Appreciate the ability to comment.
Thank you very much. Okay. All right. So then that takes us to the, I guess the very first thing is the preamble that has been displayed up there. And so what I would say, like as I mentioned, let's start out with just opening up a discussion to the group, and feel free to speak up. And we are just going to take these one at a time, even if some of them seem perfunctory. That way we know we've covered them all. And so on the preamble, is there around the table, is there feedback received from the community that you would raise to this group for purposes of spurring discussion on the preamble?
No.
Anyone?
No.
Okay, okay, we'll note that. And then, yeah, we'll put the next one. The next provision is the name and the powers of the city, section 1. Same question. Any feedback from the community, I'm sorry, let's go back to the other one. I guess I made an assumption on the preamble that there were no other comments given the body language, but I should cover that. Is anything on the preamble? Okay, sorry about that, go ahead. And then the section 1, first one, feedback received from the community regarding section 1. Okay. Anyone on the committee have any comments or items that they would want to raise related to section 1?
You just on 1 or 1A?
Just one.
Just 1, okay.
Good clarification, thank you. All right. Hearing nothing, I think that would dispatch that with that one. 1A, the tax rate. Any input from the community that anyone wants to bring to the table that they've heard, others have said, hey, you're on the charter committee, bring this up. Anything along those lines? All right, if not, is there a?
Yes, I just wondered, are there territories outside of the city that do not, or in the city that do not answer to the Sandusky City School District?
He's the man.
No, not to my knowledge, unless there's someone who knows otherwise. Everything inside the city limits is part of our city school system. I don't know what the process is, and I'm not old enough to know what happened when we annexed Venice in and how that process works. So I'm not necessarily the right person to talk about in the future should something happen. But
Okay.
right now, as it stands, there's not an address in Sandusky that's not part of the school district.
I didn't think so, but I was wondering because of the way this reads.
Right, and again, it was passed and amended in 60, so I'm sure that it's
Yeah.
been a while since they've ever had to use this.
So is there a way we could make this simpler? Because I'm gonna tell you, most people probably won't
Yeah.
understand that in any way. It's not even how we do values. The mill limitation is probably confusing to probably most residents.
Yeah, it is a little,
Hard to
Scale.
understand.
Verbose.
yeah.
Because
It is hard, I had to read it a few times just to kind of, yeah, I mean, we could, and that's a good point. Part of this is there is, and I think some of the nature of this, the clunky nature of it is because it requires the vote. And so cleaning up these provisions, I think one of the paradigms we can follow is we can say, here's something that you want to put in front of the voters. Here are some of the cleanups, and maybe kind of do that work and then submit that. And so if there is a time when they want to go with kind of an omnibus, hey, this is just a housekeeping type of thing where they can have several but advertise it as one, maybe that's something that we could consider looking at. So I think maybe with that one, what we need to really understand is what is it that they're trying to achieve. And is it even still relevant in today's world, or could it be if the circumstances change? So maybe that's a more information type of thing.
Can we, table that until a meeting when Mr. Hayberger's here? Because I
Yeah.
feel like he'd be the one to comment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So I'm gonna put that in the parking lot for more information.
yeah.
And do we want to, as you said, clean up, give the city commission a list of things we might want to change and things that they might want to look at to clean up?
Yeah, I think we should have a bucket of that.
I do
right?
too.
That maybe isn't gonna rise to the level of, like, we're gonna put this single on the ballot, but man, these things are kind of confusing, and it's been 1960, and some of them are older in vintage, it's a little harder to kind of understand. So really get at what are you trying to talk about?
So
Okay.
even changing the wording in something like this is something that would have to go to the voters?
Yep.
Ballot issue.
It's something as simple as Trevor making it more,
Yes.
yeah.
And that's why you're gonna see in here, there's some items in there for, that aren't even, we can't do anymore, that are still in there for that reason. And so the thought is, well, let's catalog that and let's do a little homework on that. And so that if there an opportunity arises where you could frame it that way, you'd still have to go item by item. You can't do them all together. You still have to do it item by item, so there'd be a lot of ballot issues. But if it was portrayed that, hey, we're modernizing the charter, and so understand that when you go, there's gonna be a lot of them, but that's the purpose. So we can certainly do that. All right. Okay. Anything else on 1A? All right. If not, then 1B. Any comments from the community or from the committee on 1B?
I think that goes in the same thing. I don't think if we get into current he, she pronouns, this doesn't fit in modern day. I'm not sure what the wording would be. It would be he and she throughout the whole thing, or
Yeah, this
citizen, or there would be another word used instead of stating it this way.
Yeah. This is one of those kind of provisions that it intends to get at the ever-present issue, but it's a 1989 version of that. So,
From Seattle,
yeah.
we would not get away with this.
Yes, I understand. And that wave's coming across the country. And so this is the 1989 version of that. But we can put that in the cleanup bucket. Does everybody agree that that's kind of falls in that category? Okay. Okay, 1C, compliance with open meeting laws.
I just wondered, does the commission have any, do they have executive sessions?
Yes,
Yeah.
they do.
And is that in here?
So,
So,
go ahead.
I was going to say, just because I had a little bit of experience with this, working with the state of Ohio, there are certain exemptions to open meeting laws. The major thing, though, is that a body can't reach a decision while in executive session. So they could discuss like a whole set of topics, and that's all outlined by the sunshine laws, what those exemptions to open meeting laws are. Discipline is a good one. You know, if you're making a decision about how to discipline an employee, you typically would move into executive session to do that, but you have to come out of executive session to reach that decision.
I understand
So-
that, but is there any provision for executive session in this?
I didn't see it.
I didn't see it either.
I think that's couched in the open meeting law. So that the way I read this provision is it says that in all instances, the city commission will abide by the existing open meetings law.
Okay.
Intending to allow flexibility in that as the state of Ohio may advance open meetings law and sunshine law. So that maybe they would change the topics that you could do executive session on because it was being abused or something. The city commission would then have to step up to that new standard, and I think that's why it's written the way it is.
That's fine, I just was curious.
Yeah, no, it's good, it's good call out. So, yeah,
So we can't change that to be something lesser than the state of Ohio?
With state of
Right.
Ohio standards.
Oh, yeah.
Rules? So,
yeah, it's a statement
moot point if it
of
was
fact, and it borrows the state, the state law, basically. So, okay, anything else on that one? Okay, if not, we'll move into the form of government, which may spur a little more discussion. We've had some audience participation here from Mr. Schwanger, has provided some feedback directly from the community. So on that one, let's start with what has, around the table, feedback that you're hearing from the community with regard to the form of government. And, currently we have the commissioner manager, so we have a city manager who serves as the executive that operates the city, as opposed to a mayor, a strong mayor. So, we elect the commissioners at large for the whole community, not a ward system currently, so.
So I guess I want to clarify what we're talking about here is we're not necessarily changing the form and this commission manager plan, but rather changing how those commissioners, that's the conversation that we're about to have, right? How the commissioners are elected and what and who they represent. So it's really just that clause, who shall be elected at large in manner, is what we're looking at. We're not necessarily looking at the whole form.
I think you're looking at, this is before the body in its entirety. You could say we want to go away from the city manager form of government. Now, that would have to pass. What you're referring to is what Mr. Schwanger brought up,
Yes.
is the ward system. So that's an aspect of it, but it's all open to debate and discussion.
Yes.
So when we say ward system, you're right, that's exactly what the provision in here that would need to be changed to do that. But the entirety of this, for purposes of our discussion, is open. If somebody wanted to propose a different kind of format for the government for us to think about, then they can do that. Or someone can come in the public and do that as well.
I've heard more comments over the years on the favor of being warded. And having moved a lot of times, lived in cities, both had wards and non-wards, it just seemed when you were in a city with a ward, that councilman was more receptive to listen to you if you were directly in that ward versus talking to Senate. I can talk to any of them, but it just seemed, and you also tend to pull from that ward. It's a much less expensive ordeal to become a city commissioner if I only have to knock on 1,000 doors versus 5,000 doors.
Can someone explain the difference between the way we're set up now and a ward, how they would function, or what a ward entails, what it is, in layman's terms?
A ward is just a smaller chunk of the whole, right?
So it's just dividing the city into
Right,
different.
the city's divided right now into 16 precincts, so the most natural ward system would be 4 of 4, I would think. But most warded cities have geographically set up.
So it's geographic, it's not based on population, or,
Some neighborhoods, some call it neighborhoods, not wards.
okay.
I believe it's a combination of both population and division of the city into taking precincts and breaking them apart. The city was under a ward system, I think, back to about 1990. I'm off on the date. I don't recall when the change came about.
Last time we had wards was.
But we were under the ward system previously.
Yeah.
I don't know how it got changed, but I'm hearing a lot of comments, as Mr. Berkowitz addressed, that people from different sections of the city feel as though they're not getting any attention, and they have no individual they can talk to kind of take over and get things accomplished for them. And so I think that we need to take another look at the ward system, see if it has merit, if it's got any strength behind it. There are good cities nearby that are still under the ward system. It seems to work for them. Now, the other problem or issue is not a problem. The issue is, can you get folks in a ward to run for commission for their particular area?
My biggest question.
For the representation. That's the other challenge. Mr. Wutzer's got something.
Through the chairman to the commission, just some of the specific questions that were asked. So while you do use neighborhood lines and looking how you would set up wards, the federal constitution does demand one person, one vote. So they actually do have to be exactly or as close to another software that allows that to be as close as possible. So each ward would have to have nearly the exact same number of people, rounding up by 1 or 2 people, at the end of that. And there are a variety of ways that different communities do it. For example, Cleveland is all ward-based, so every one of their city councilors, other than the mayor, obviously, is elected to a ward, and each ward represents roughly 25,000 people per their charter. So that is one thing to think about, is wards are very small here, for better or worse. Now, Columbus, on the other hand, has 7 council people, as opposed to, I think, Cleveland has 17. And in Columbus, they're all elected at large, similar to our city commission. Now, there are some other communities that would that have a blend between at-large seats and ward seats, and then the combination of that is, and so there may be, say, 2 at-large seats and 5 wards, and you'd have the at-large seats be up like 1 every other odd year, and then with 3 or 2 ward seats. So there's hybrid systems as well. But the population does have to be exactly proportionate to meet the federal constitution. So.
One more question. Do we have any idea how the city would be broken up into wards? Is there anybody who's done that research?
So I think at the end of the answer to that is I don't think so, other than we have some history. But for purposes just to level set here, the idea is there enough public outcry for the city to actually look at that and to propose it to the voters? And so that would be work that would absolutely have to be done. The other thing is there's currently 7, and so then 7 people on the commission. And so how do you break it up with wards and then at large people? So there'd be lots of work to be done. I think what we're talking about is being responsive to what we're hearing in the community, and is there enough impetus behind that where we would recommend as this body is that this is something that the city commission should consider putting on the ballot after doing that homework, and they would have to come up with whatever that plan was that would attract enough votes to make this, change from the current form. So it isn't for us necessarily to lay out that other than in an exploratory way to kind of conceptualize it, but the actual particulars of it is beyond our scope. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
The commentary that I've heard regarding wards is that the person in the ward is so specific to needs of his ward as opposed to the needs of the whole community. So I think that's a con for the ward system. So.
I had the same kind of reaction in thinking about it in the world in which we live. We're already kind of divide ourselves against ourselves many times. And so that is a con that you have to think about. And so you balance that up against responsiveness and size of city. And so that really is the debate that needs to happen. And so I would echo that.
Part of the reason why a person would run for city commission, in my opinion, is to represent your city as a whole.
Yes.
And you, in today's world, you have every opportunity presented to you through email, social media, the administration. They're all available to talk to. I mean, I've never had an issue, if I had an issue, to go and get an answer from somebody. I mean, it's there, it's available. When it comes to a lot of different things within a certain area or a certain subject matter, it may get a little more difficult depending on the scope of the situation. But as a person that would want to represent the city, I feel you would want to represent the city as a whole. And as Ms. Corso mentioned, coming to my little world and just taking care of my little world, and not paying attention to everybody as a whole, I think could be somewhat of an issue. And I think someone else mentioned to the fact, if nobody wants to run in your ward, which is, in my opinion, something that is very realistic, what are you going to do? What are you going to do?
So I think the most likely way you'd break down wards, you'd have like 4 commissioners living in the same ward right now.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, but
Maybe 5, depending.
bear in mind also, the elections, we've got 3 coming up, seats, I think, in 21. And so that would break that open. And then the 4 would come up in what, 24, 23, 2023? I'm not sure if ward system is right or wrong, but I look at the cities across the state that are in the ward system, and they seem to be doing fairly well. Cities that are comparable to Sandusky in size and budget. I did a little research on it myself. I found that Barberton was under the ward system, similar population, and they had 5 councilmen or commissioners and then 2 at large. And City of Avon, similar situation. similar budget, similar, if it works for others, I'm just throwing it out there. I think perhaps we should get some more input from someone that can tell us yay or nay, it works or doesn't.
Is this system broken, though, that we need to fix it? Or is it just something that we're looking at to maybe try to better the representation? Or how do we get people from each corner of the city to run and be a part of something
I
bigger,
totally agree with you.
you know?
I totally agree with you. But in the past, the city was able to accomplish that. Is it broken? I don't know, but I hear, I have a lot of people coming and chattering to me about they're just not getting things fixed in their neighborhoods. And I tell them, talk to the city, come to the commission meetings, and voice your concerns. And unfortunately, it's like the audience we have tonight, just a couple of people, and people want to complain, but they don't want to come forward. And so what do you do?
Yeah, and it just as a point of order, we're not expecting like we're going to end this conversation tonight and say we're going to do war or not. It's really to get the issue out on the table. And so to me, it sounds like there's enough interest in talking about this and talking through this, that this would be a topic that we would revisit. Okay, so I just want to throw that out there, not to stunt the conversation right now, but to make the point that we don't have to like pound through this and say, all right, we're done. And I know no one's doing that, but I just want to say that out loud. I think at the end of the day, when I'm listening to that, what I think is the core of that is, and I think we could all agree on this, we want a government that's responsive to the needs of the people. It's really, what's the best methodology to do that? Is that a structural thing you need to put in place where you're rigidly putting in, okay, these are the wards, so they say this person, and then we run into, are people gonna run or not? Or is it, we need to get out, and why isn't somebody in these neighborhoods willing to step up and run? And so is there that part of it? I think those are really good debates to have. What's the focal point of the commissioners? That's another thing when I hear that is, can commissioners elected at large or together look at the parts of the city from the context of the whole? Because I think they want to be responsive to that as well. So, I think those are the things I think through when I'm thinking about, do you need a systematic change or do you need to recruit and use the system that you have, and is the government open to input? Is there an apparatus in place for input, like Kurt's mentioning, where, boy, if you can't get a hold of somebody in today's world, there's nowhere to hide. So anyways, other comments on this topic? Yeah.
I have one more question, wards aside. In this portion of the charter, do we know why it's specific to 7 citizens? Why is it not 5?
That's another, I was gonna bring that up. There's 3 parts of that city, it's the commissioner manager plan. It's a commission the size of 7. Is that the right size? And elected at large. Those are the 3 long poles in the tent. So 7 is the number they've settled on. They could, there's others, as I'm sure if you've done some research, not every city commission has 7 people on it. So, I think when I think through that issue, it's really about what's the dynamics, the decision-making dynamics that come along with 3 people versus 5 people versus 7 people versus 9 people. I don't know, it's the right answer resides in what the majority thinks. So we can table that issue. Anybody want to weigh in on that? Do you have do you think it should be smaller, bigger, or you're just?
I don't have any research or facts or stats behind this. I just don't know why it'd be 7. Seems like a lot of people to manage and pay for a city of our size.
Okay.
And I've heard both sides, both. Oh, we need 5 because the population is down and blah, blah, blah. And then I heard the other side that says, no, if you go down to 5, you're going to have a small group that may have too much power. Because at 5, you only have to have 3 strong leaders to sway the whole city. So
5's better than 3, though.
yeah.
Can we put this out for comment to the city and to the public? Because I think that's something we need to hear both sides on.
Yeah, and if I could just, one thing through the chair to the commission to keep in mind is Sandusky is a diverse city, but it has a small minority, relatively speaking, as far as African Americans in the community. It's about 27% of the population per the census. And I think part of having 7 seats is that it allows it to be more likely that the commission ends up being more representative. For example, our 6th and 7th vote getter right now are 2 of our 3 African Americans. If you went down to 5, you'd be becoming a less representative city as far as, you know, those people having voices that potentially have been shut out of the electoral process in the city's history. So it's just something to keep in mind is by virtue of having more, as people have more opportunities to vote, for someone that they feel is representative of them, even if that population makes up a smaller overall percentage, it is more likely that they get someone on the commission. So for right now, Blake Harris and Wes Poole would be the 2 commissioners who weren't on the commission if you went down to 5. So it's just something that I would, you know, you wouldn't necessarily think of that, but it's something to think about.
That was exactly the point I was going to make, Eric, so thank you.
Great point.
Okay. So it sounds like there, I don't hear any, I'm gonna get to your comment in a second, anybody for going for 9.
9 is too many.
Okay, so we can take that off the
Leave it
table.
I would like to see 9, maybe.
Out of here.
Alex wants 9.
Leave your agenda at the door, Alex.
Notwithstanding that.
Personal agenda.
But as far as input from the community, I think the interesting point is that we're supposed to be those voices that they can come up to talk to all of us, and we bring that. We're putting this out online, and the meetings are open to the public. And so, in what I would encourage anybody to do is if part of what we should be doing is talking to people about these things. And if you're sensing some strong opinions on that, you should invite them to come to this meeting and to provide their input to that. So I think we're all ambassadors of the process in that way. And then the transparency with which we're operating should hopefully encourage participation from the community in that regard.
Well, have we specifically said people can comment yet to the public at the meetings?
I mean, it's open to the public. These meetings are open to the public, and we just established that.
Right, that's what I'm
So-
saying. So for tonight, we
Yeah.
don't have anybody sitting out here, maybe because they didn't know they could.
Well, yeah,
comment.
but what I'm saying is this isn't the last word on
No, I
this.
know, no, I
Yeah,
know.
Yeah. So I'm just saying,
This is
yes, they
future.
can
This
come in.
isn't now.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
can come in. Yeah, we want that,
Right.
actually.
I have a quick question, not to beat a dead horse, but just talking about words again, I don't think I understand how the words, the lines of the words would be drawn. Was this just geographically, or how is that done? Because I'm worried about like a Hunger Games district type thing happening here. If you guys get
That is a
that
risk,
reference,
for sure.
that's kind of my concern.
Through the chair to the commission, the way that I've seen this done in the past is every year after the census, Sandusky would have established a new population. You'd probably have to establish in the charter, but generally speaking, there is a ward boundary commission that gets put into place by the city commission, very similar to a charter review, but this one would get together once every 10 years, and it would have to convene every year after the census so that and then they would set boundaries based on population, and they would try to take into account the historical geographical lines or natural borders between neighborhoods, et cetera, but population would be king at the end of the day because each ward would have to have roughly the same amount of people. I've lived through one of those processes when I worked in the city of Cleveland, and they did a really good job of doing, it can be a political process because whether somebody lives on one side of a street or the other side of a street can mean whether they keep their seat or not. But ultimately the majority of the city commission would vote to set those lines after each census every 10 years. But usually the charter would call for a commission to be appointed to help them set those lines. But ultimately, you couldn't just say the West End is going to get a council or a commission person because the West End actually on a per capita basis is less popular. The reality is, and I think this is why you may find wards are a challenge in Sandusky, is that half the city's population lives in what we call the central neighborhood of the city. And so you'd end up probably trying to get like an east side ward that'd be grabbing central population to like balance it out. You'd get a west side ward that would be grabbing population to balance it out. And you'd be diluting actually the vote of the central neighborhoods of the city because we just pack them in. They're so much more dense than the other parts of it. That doesn't mean you shouldn't look at it, and that's probably a longer answer than the question that you asked. But basically there'd be a process and it could take everything like natural and historical boundaries into place. But at the end of the day, they'd have to send something to the city commission that they would choose that was proportionate from a population perspective. And it's hard to do here because we did this last year for the state of the city. We went through because we heard what people were saying about where we were spending money, and we wanted to make sure that we weren't actually over-investing in certain parts of the city. And what we found is we were actually under-investing in the center part of the city, which includes much more than downtown, obviously, because it's so much more densely populated than the west side and the east side of the city. But we'd heard from people that we were under-investing in those areas, and the reality is I think they perceived that, but what they don't realize is that they're not as densely populated as, where you see apartment buildings, et cetera, in the core of the town.
Thank you.
Kelly, is there any chance just by, if you could get like the addresses of the city, are we allowed to have the addresses of the city commissioners where they're located at now? Just so we have an idea of what areas where they live and what's represented?
I've looked it up, I probably still remember.
Huh?
Said I looked it up, I probably still remember.
Okay.
So like, Dennis Murray lives on Cedar Point Road. Dick Brady lives on Willow.
Minzer's on the Cove.
Minzer's on the Cove.
Dave's
West
on
Pool.
McKinley.
Yeah, Dave's on McKinley. West Pool is on Old Gate. Blake is on Warren Street.
Naomi's on Hayes.
Naomi's on Hayes.
Yeah, a lot of East Siders.
Yeah, it's predominant, like, I noticed that when I ran, I could walk to 4 other
Commissioners.
opponents'
To my
houses.
point about the districts,
Yeah.
kind of setting up the haves and the
So,
have-nots with these wards.
I
don't know
mean,
about
what does that say or doesn't say is, these folks on this side want to run and the folks on the west side don't want to run,
Well, yeah, and that's, again, if you take into account, just, I live, a block away from Dave Waddington,
Yeah, you're
and
right.
John Monroe lives, on the corner of Finch and Warren. I
So
mean,
they're all on
It's-
Columbus
yeah.
Ave East, basically.
right. So even, the alternatives there
Yeah.
were same neighborhood, basically.
And so that's part of the ward, right? The ward system forces that issue to come into play, and it structurally requires, it demands that other people run, which then runs up against, who are you gonna, if there aren't
Yeah.
people there that are willing to raise their hand and run, then that dilutes the,
Exactly.
the commission a little bit.
Catch 22 there.
Yeah,
So I think
definitely.
there's enough interest in this. I think that we should bring this back for a deeper discussion and maybe invite in, as I know they've done in the past, to kind of provide a little bit of additional external education for this group on the ward system and how that might work. That will allow us also to make sure that we're getting any input on the size of the commission. And the one that we haven't touched on is the commissioner manager. We have a city manager form of government, which is basically the elected officials appoint a professional, unelected person to manage the city on their behalf. And that's another aspect of the city. We haven't talked about that. I don't know if they're interested in talking about that as an aspect of potential differentiation.
I can leave if you guys want to talk about this in my absence.
Well, it's not you personally, if you don't have the stomach for it, I get it, but I think in the name of completeness, that is the other long pole here, and I just, when we are gonna invite someone in to discuss this, I think the number of people on the commission and the ward system kind of go hand in hand, but that kind of bubbles up into if you're thinking about that, are those folks then going to pick the city manager as we do now? But what we're really concerned about is that the elected officials are representative of the entirety of the city, and there's responsiveness and representation for all concerned. Is that really kind of what we're driving at here, or is there a larger issue?
I don't think so.
I mean, if you want to force somebody to run from the west side, you got to do ward system is the way.
Yeah.
But if somebody wants to serve their community as a whole, it doesn't matter where they live, as far as I'm concerned.
So why don't we table this for an upcoming meeting when we can, and we'll bring this issue up, the form of government, and these issues up and we'll have someone come in and present, maybe one or two people. I know you guys have some contacts before. We'll circulate the information about who those folks might be in advance of the meeting, and then we'll listen to them. We can answer some of these questions a little more scientifically and less anecdotally. If that works for everybody, then that we can move on from this issue with that consensus for this evening. Is that fair?
Fair.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Would it be too early to look back and at least get a picture of what the award division was like previously?
No, I mean, I think that sort of information is helpful.
That should be available in the city historical
Archive
documents.
somewhere. I mean, still on some maps you can see if you
I don't
find the
remember
map.
award system.
You don't?
I'd like to see
I do
it
not.
personally.
The schools used to be named after the wards
I
there.
wasn't alive.
Well, that might be, but not recently.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't think it is.
What changed?
So, Mr. Chairman, I
Monroe
know that it was
named wards.
proposed on the ballot and defeated, and it was during my time here. So I know that I have those geographical maps, the way they were drawn up to go to the ballot in my office, so I can get that in your hands.
Okay, that would be a good piece of history. I mean, if we're considering it, we ought to know what happened the last time and what the proposals were. We can learn from that history as we kind of sort through what our recommendation would be to the city commission.
Great.
Okay? All right, good discussion. Hopefully, everybody feels like we've gotten most of the issues out on the table, so thank you. All right, the next one is the city commission. And effectively, that kind of goes over a little bit of what we just talked about, but in more detail. It's 7 citizens, and it gets into, the 4-year term. Tom was mentioning what the election cycle was coming up, but it has a couple things in there. It has the length of the term, it has term limits, and to be considered as well in that provision. And so, I'll start again as, what are we hearing from the community on that issue, if anything, or what does anyone around the table have to say about that particular item?
I'm not sure. I can't remember why they put in the 3-term limit. What was the reasoning behind that versus the?
So,
Yeah.
through the chair, that the 3-term limit was placed on very recently. Was that what, 2017, 2016?
2016, it says here.
And so they'd had 2 terms before that, and my understanding
Right.
was based on conversations related to why they changed it from 2 to 3. We got into why they put 2 on in the first place, and apparently at that time there had been some really long-serving city commissioners, and people felt like they had maybe too much control of the day-to-day. They wanted to break that up a little bit. So that's when they first instituted term limits. And I want to say that was in the 80s. Do people remember when they put the term limits on?
It was in
Late 80s.
Late 80s?
Yeah.
And so there was a sense that we needed stability because we'd had so much turnover and things were really stabilizing. And so they put it to the voters in 16 because we had folks, be they like a Dick Brady or a Dennis Murray, who may have been running into term limits, and they felt like that stability was important, or they were hearing that from folks within the community.
So
they put it on and they let
stability was the answer.
the general sense of what they wanted from that.
Versus having a lack of people run for city commissioner type of thing.
And that could be it too, but I definitely think there was a sense of they wanted, at least when I was talking to city commissioners, when they made, because that was outside of the charter review that they put that on, they just used their own power to put it on the ballot, was because they were hearing from folks that wanted to see them stick around for longer. And so they tried to be modest in making it just one more term and not eliminating term limits altogether. And it passed pretty overwhelmingly, I think, when they put that on the ballot. I think it was maybe 60-70% of the voters approved it, so.
Okay.
And I think it had to do too with what we see in our presidencies today. It takes 4 years just to get used to the job, just to get your feet wet,
Exactly
just to get
right.
into the city. So then by your second term, now you're rocking and you're rolling, and then it's over, and you're back up for reelection. And so I think extending that one more year was a way to keep it productive and the stability.
So it's the four-year term and a recently approved as short ago as 2016. So everybody feel comfortable with that we've heard from the citizens on that, and then that's working, and I think that's well stated in terms of giving them another time after they've gotten their feet wet to actually make
To
some
do the work,
progress.
yeah.
So, okay. So then, section 4 is the qualification to be a candidate for city commission. And so I will again open the floor up for any comments that you've heard from the community that you want to bring to the table, or that you yourself as one of the committee members would like to bring to the table on that issue.
I'd like to bring the first sentence to the table. I think that the multi-year residency requirement for running for commission should be a year at the most. I just think it discourages people from running. I use myself as an example. I went to Ohio State for my undergraduate degree, and I lived in Columbus for 6 years, wanting to move back into the city. And if I didn't want to, but say I wanted to run for commission, to have to wait for 3 years, well, as a person like me, I'm very driven. I'm not going to wait 3 years. By that time, I'd probably have moved on to another venture. I just don't think that that's the best requirement for the city. I think it discourages people from getting involved, and young people especially who have gone off to college or lived somewhere else and decided to come back and want to get involved with their city politics. I mean, if you want to have some type of residency requirement, I understand the logic behind it, wanting people to be involved in the community before you try to start having power in your community. However, I think, a year should be the maximum residency requirement. It's just personal.
Okay.
Thoughts
I
on
agree
that?
with that.
I disagree with it. I think that a year is not, is not long enough, and I think if you want to be involved in the city, there are many ways to be involved and to learn about the city and learn about the government before you jump into running for a city commissioner. So I'm in favor of 3 years.
Okay. Others want to weigh in? Yeah.
I'm actually right in the middle. I feel that first year is that honeymoon phase of living in the community, and then you've kind of made your decision after that year, if you'd like to stay and become more involved.
Sure.
We all come in very gung-ho, but I think it should probably be the 18 months, because then you've made the commitment to stay.
I like 18
And then
months.
staying a little longer.
That's fair.
You've seen the light.
I've-
You know what it's really all about.
Absolutely.
All right.
And I speak from someone who lived my whole life here, moved away and came back. So that's
I'm in the
different
same
from
boat.
someone who's come from the city, come to the city not knowing anything and has to rebuild and learn the city politics. I knew the city politics when I moved back in 2016. So to have to wait 3 years for I grew up here, so that's where, but I agree, 18 months sounds fair to me too.
How about others?
I would agree. I think there could be potential missed opportunities for, individuals who have a passion and interest for running, and, you certainly wouldn't want to miss those opportunities. So I would be in favor with looking at potentially a different amount of term prior to running
Okay.
of residency, so.
I think 1's too short and 3's too long, so split the difference.
Yeah, that's what I said,
Yeah,
18 months, that's a good
Yeah,
number.
1 year, you're lucky if you can find your way around. I still have trouble with Taylor and Tyler.
My wife still.
The way the election cycle works, though, I'm thinking, 18 months has been thrown out there. It would be 18 months roughly before someone decides to run. They've been in town as a resident for a year, so 18 months is probably appropriate.
Yeah.
I think that it strikes a great balance between where you want people who are new or came back to the community with those fresh ideas to have the ability to get involved. But I like the 18 months because you're right. You're full of exuberance the first year. It's new, it's great. And then when you go around the track the second time, you start to notice things, and then you really decide, am I motivated enough to actually get in there to make a difference, as opposed to just being overwhelmed with additional enthusiasm. So I really like 18 months as well. Others that we haven't heard from want to weigh in on this?
I think 18 months is very fair.
Okay,
Agree.
okay.
I think 3 years I think it's better because if I could run in 2 months and I lived here my whole life and I went to college and then I came back and there's not a lot of people who do that, but I think you can get enough involved in 3 years. And I think you need to show that your involvement to be elected to the commission. It's not like they're gonna elect someone who's 22 anyway, so. I mean, they could, but they're not going to, so.
Yeah, when I hear you say that, one of the things is I think that would be, that would actually be a really great campaign issue, right? If somebody came in, they had 18 months and they were challenging the structure and trying to get into there, one of the counter arguments for somebody that had been around longer would be, hey, I've been involved in the community board. It would be a great battle of ideas is the way I would kind of look at that so that you get the new idea. And maybe there is somebody who's been here for 18 months and they are ready to, they don't need the seasoning that most of us do. And that happens every once in a while, but you know what I mean? So I look at this like should it be a barrier that you can't even try as opposed to a political issue, which you raised, which I think is a good one. Do you have enough experience, but shouldn't the voters kind of decide on that?
Yeah, I think the onus has got to be on the candidate to prove their experience and then
Yeah.
the voter to sort of sift through that experience themselves.
And
so.
make that decision.
So again, it's like the wards. Is it structural or is it political? I can see both arguments on that, but.
I agree too, like David said, we could be passing up on talent. I mean, as Sandusky continues to grow and become more attractive to people, I mean, look at like the Hographies who came back or Kima who came back and, you're rooted in Sandusky forever going forward. I think that's what you said. I mean, I think if you had to wait 3 years, you might, like you said, lose interest.
Yeah, okay. Other comments on that? All right, so that we got to the first sentence, that was a great debate. So, there's, the rest of it is a little bit.
The whole thing.
The rest of it is a little bit more prescriptive and not necessarily lend itself to that, but I want to make sure that I've covered if there's any other parts of that anyone wanted to discuss.
There is actually. I think we really need to evaluate what kind of qualities or qualifications they have. I think we need to look at people's backgrounds and look for how other cities qualify someone who's going to be on our commission. Are they a felon? Do they commit a felony while in or on that position as commissioner? I think it's something we should definitely explore.
I would like to hear more on that topic.
On the code of conduct, for
Code of
commissioners.
conduct.
I'd like more on that as well.
Yeah, I agree. Every word you just said.
Me
We do need to, I think, have further conversation about maybe disqualifications as opposed to qualifications. Unfortunately, it's a negative, but.
But it is a conversation
you
that
have
needs to
have
be
a
had.
conversation about, yeah.
Okay.
But are we overlooking one thing, that the voters make the final call?
Agree.
Yeah.
We'll just put the information out for them.
Yeah. And as we've said on other things, with social media and everything else, you're an idiot. It's not going to take long for the word to get out. You're an idiot.
I thought
Whether you've
that,
been here 1 year, 3 years, or 18 months.
We also know how media can portray things and not disclose the whole picture, take it in another direction.
Yeah.
So,
for some reason, I was thinking that you couldn't run for office if you were a convicted felon. Is that not the case?
Not in Ohio.
Not in Ohio.
No. You can run for federal if you're a convicted felon. There's about 50 to 75 in the House and Senate right now that have felonies.
Really?
Yeah, you can run for federal with a felony, not city.
That's because
Any-
there's so
any
many layers
position.
of felonies.
Hmm?
Those people who don't have a felony don't realize there's so many classes of felonies.
yes.
So
Exactly.
I was going to say,
Well,
we
We
in
all think
different
that means you
states,
killed
Right.
somebody.
Right.
be a whole other
Each state
debate.
defines what a felony is in
Yeah.
a slightly different way, and.
Yep.
Okay, I mean, so we can put that one in the parking lot a little bit to come back and talk about that. It sounds like we have a strong consensus on 18 months. And then it seems like there's maybe a little bit of a debate that needs to be couched in what the law is on that, on how that feels like something that the law is gonna have something to say about, you know? And maybe it's a matter of understanding kind of a little bit of what we just talked about is what are the disqualifying things as it exists today? You know, there's an overlay to when you can and can't run that I can't quote today, but maybe would that help if we figured that out a little bit? Like, this has to deal with mostly with like conflicts of interest from a positional perspective and not character. And I would say that this leaves the character judgment to the voter.
Agreed.
You know, if anything, I think we should look what other cities are doing.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we don't have any
Sure.
beyond at this point.
All right.
It's legit.
That's a good place to start. Okay? Does everybody agree that we can do a little bit of that? Okay?
Adding it to the table list.
All right. Anything else on, we're on section 4, qualifications.
I have a question on vacancies. Are we still on that one? Or are we still on?
That's next.
Next up,
Good,
okay.
Great segue.
Okay.
Go right there.
Thank you.
Keep this moving.
Okay, vacancies.
Moving right along. The only question I have on vacancies is about someone who is being notified that they are they're being selected to be on the commission, and you're sending them a first-class mail. I've had a lot of problems with mail, and I think it should be a registered or certified letter as opposed to first-class mail.
They have to sign for it, right? That's the difference.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I got somebody's tax returns the other day in my mailbox. They weren't mine.
Check.
Yeah.
Do the police officers still deliver the agendas to the city commissioners?
They do not.
They do not? Okay.
Everything's electronic.
Everything's electronic now.
So the overall paradigm of this is the next highest vote getter is first up to fill the position. I mean, that seems pretty,
That's legit.
you know, fair. And then if failing that, then a majority vote of the then seated commissioners. So is there any commentary on that process? And then the other thing I would add is the timing of it and when you would need to stand for election is another, you know, aspect of it that folks might want to weigh in on.
I think it's clean myself, that pair.
It's worked in the past, so I don't know. And don't take for me asking for strong opinions. I'm just making sure there aren't any. So, okay. All right. Okay, salary and bonds for the city commissioners.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
this one is a good one because our commissioners are grossly underpaid for the work that's involved in being a city commissioner. The folks at home see a commissioner sitting at a table here for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours, sometimes a little longer, and they think, for the most part, that that's all they do to prepare for a commission meeting. And as we all know, just going through the stuff that we have to prepare to be here, they put in a lot of time. $100 a week doesn't swing it. And I did a little comparison shopping and looking across, again, at the cities across the state with comparable budgets and population. And the numbers run from $79.20 in Marysville as an annual, as the low, to Perkins Township at the high of $22,675 a year. And that they also get benefits with that 22 grand. I took 8 cities, again, very comparable. I could name them off if you like. and then averaged them out, and it works out to $13,049 a year. I think that's probably a good starting point. That's only working out to about $275 a week. And for the hours involved, and again, preparing for a meeting, it probably works out to $25 an hour. And we're talking about professional people here, and for the most part, that make more than that. I mean, folks at GM make $25 to $40 an hour, putting little knobs and nuts and bolts together. So my suggestion is that we really dig into this and start paying a reasonable fee. And this, if we then start looking at the ward system too, it may encourage others to at least say, you know, because who wants to go to work and put up with all this stuff? I mean, I know I sit out in the audience and I come to the podium on a fairly regular basis, and being a city commissioner is a thankless job. I mean, it really is. And, you know, they get beat up a lot and they shouldn't have to be abused for $100 a week. So I'm suggesting that somehow we get this up to a $300-400 a week.
And when I Googled for inflation, that $100 a week was actually comparable to $220 now.
There you go.
Just factor in limited inflation.
There was a point that was made our last meeting about, forgive me if I don't remember what the acronym is for OPERS, but in education it's FTE.
Yeah.
You know, what that one credit hour, service, whatever it's called.
Trevor said that.
Yeah.
Yeah, OPERS.
Yeah.
OPRS.
I thought Eric brought that up, actually.
Yeah, I think Eric did, and I think it was like the minimum was like 7,200.
$773 a month or something like that.
Yeah, it's about 8,000 a year, basically, rounding up.
Under, yeah.
I think that's a good place to start.
I think that should be the minimum.
I agree.
Yeah, so that would be a hard wire on the bottom, like no less than.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Be adjusted so that the pay would always be at that level or above.
Yeah, they
It's a
shouldn't
floor,
have to
not
come
a
back
ceiling.
and do this all over again in 10, 20 years.
We don't want to scare the constituents and say 5,000 to 13,000, say.
Yeah,
What?
tripling it,
No,
I don't
I'm
think they
just
go
saying
for
from a
that.
political standpoint, I don't know how that would go over.
I agree.
Say that again?
I
Like
think
a
it
lead
should have been
balloon.
upped a while ago. I think they missed it the last time around.
Yeah.
It hasn't been touched in 20 years.
Yeah,
So
clearly, it
I
hasn't been.
think that we might even say something about, you know, putting that
OPERS.
bottom in there, but also putting a time limit where we have to come back and reevaluate what that
Based on
salary
the
is too.
inflation and,
Right.
yeah.
Does their salary include any benefits? Do they get health insurance out of that, or retirement, or?
Nope.
Okay, just curious.
I will say that Perkins Township, you mentioned them, they make, I think, 22,000 a year. That's based off their budget for the year, and that's by state law.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I thought townships.
Well,
were
do
government.
make
And
a
they're a
lot.
township, so they're.
And they're a
they're-
township, and then there's only 3 of them, and that's a whole nother issue, but.
Right.
It's $22,675.56.
It's, yeah, and they
Plus
get benefits.
But for, like Huron, which is, you know, a city council, theirs is 9,000 for another comparable, I think. And I also like Mr. Burquest, if you just do the inflation and you want to keep them in the same place, that puts us at 220, which is around probably 9,000 or 10,000 a year. And you know, it feels like upping that to that. I like some of the structural stuff too. I mean, if you think about it, you just put it in there and then they won't do it the next time. It'll be 10 years before they look at it again unless you wire it in there that they have to.
Or you write it in such a way that it automatically adjusts on an annual basis based on, you know,
Yeah.
inflationary numbers, the same with salaries for everybody else in the city.
Or based on the OBERS, is that what it is?
OPERS.
OPERS?
Yeah. Yeah, that would be the floor. You're suggesting that they look at CPI and adjust it so that it stays the same number over time.
Yeah, I always thought to keep things simple, $1,000 a month, it's gotta be worth $1,000 a month, you know, 12 grand. 12 grand a year. And, you know, it is something that you're gonna have to look at with the amount of commissioners we have, because all of a sudden you take 7 times 12 or whatever the number is.
Yeah.
And the people out in the public, it's gonna be, you know, something for them to swallow and take in. You know, you start throwing, I like how you said, Tom, it's like starting somewhere. We gotta start somewhere and then go from there. We can't throw 22 grand out like Perkins Township and expect that, because it's all gonna go in the budget. Each commissioner's gonna get, do you or do you not wanna put insurance and benefits into that? Because, you know, now you're looking at a pretty significant number that's gonna take away from something else.
But we don't want to discourage people from running it, and I don't think any of our commissioners are running for the pay. But certainly, you know.
Helpful. Let's be realistic. I
There are
mean, you
probably
throw
people
out
not running
12
because
grand
of the
a
pay.
year,
So,
you know, I mean, you're gonna
It's a
maybe
headache
be
for
apt to pick up a
$5,000.
few more people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
so if you look at, so Perkins Township's 22,003 commissioners, they're paying $66,000 for their political leadership. If you.
Plus benefits.
Yeah, plus benefits, but if
Yeah.
you just look at that and you back that, it's $9,500 a person. If you break it down by 7. So I think we're kind of hovering around that, 9 to 13 kind of range, it feels like. Is that?
Yeah, I'm in on that.
Well, I do want to add something else in this, is that matrix that they sent us with the population and the salaries, what they're not including is budget. You know, what the city of Sandusky manages.
Yep.
What we expect our commissioners to manage. I believe it's a $77 million budget. You know, so I think that's something that should be taken into consideration when we're looking at these other cities. You know, what are we
Someone's gonna
asking
suffer.
them? Yeah, what are we asking them to look at?
Yeah, Perkins Township budget, it has to be less than 10 million a year compared to Sandusky, and their
I mean, I could be 15.
trustees are being paid 20.
And it's at 12 times 7,
Perkins Boulevard, 12,
94K.
15.
You're up
So-
to it.
No, I'm
It's at
sorry,
12
that's
times 7,
77
we're
million.
94K.
That was the wrong
You figure
one. It was
Perkins is
77
at 65
something
plus
else.
perks. We're right there in line.
It's 25 million, I think.
Yeah, city budget,
All right,
No.
Go ahead,
Is
go
it
ahead.
26 and a half?
city budget is about
Sorry.
25
let's
million.
get a little order in here. Go ahead. No, not you, just,
No.
let's go one at a time. Go ahead.
Okay, the city budget is roughly $25 million a year, and Perkins is at 12,715. Perkins' population is 11,700, and we're at like 24,912 or something like that.
Different forms of government, but yeah. I
Agreed,
hear you.
agreed.
So, I'm not saying that's good or bad, I'm saying that's a consideration. So,
But that's in there as the high. Now, if I throw that one completely out of the mix, and then I start looking at these others, their population base, again, is really very similar to ours. Form of government is similar, in my opinion. And the budgets are much closer to ours.
yeah, okay. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify, I apologize, I had my notes, the city actually handles our water and sewer for 77,000 people.
Okay.
It's not it's $77 million budget.
I read it the same
Thank
way,
you.
so.
Thank you, I apologize
I was like,
for
yeah,
that.
it's 77 million.
But that budget number that we handle versus cities of the same size, I think that's important to consider as well.
Yep, okay. All right, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I agree with the points that, different points that are made here. One of the things that I found useful, or that I think would be, maybe more information would be nice, is when you think about the budget of the city commission, and when you look at what our city offers in terms of the facilities with water and sewer, on this list here, is there maybe a way to narrow that down to maybe, instead of being, however many is on this list, we can kind of pair the, what we offer to, a smaller list that can maybe give us a more comparable in terms of what others are doing out there based on budget, facilities offered, so.
Okay.
Well, I happen to look at whether they were providing water and sewer, whether they had their own plants or not, and in most cases they did. But another can of worms to open up, I guess, is that in most cases, they were also had a rec center and a pool, and, I mean, quite frankly, I don't know how they do it with their budgets and their population base, and that's one other item that I keep hearing about from the public is we need a rec center, we need a pool, and I keep saying, well, tell us how you're gonna support it. So I don't want to get that one going.
Yeah, right, but I mean, the
I ain't
point
going
is, how many things, to back to this point, how many different operational aspects of the city? Now, remember, and the other thing that I would say a little bit is they hire a city manager to kind of do some of that, so I think we got to take that into consideration. They're looking at him and providing that oversight, or him or her, whoever it happens to be, providing that oversight while they drive that through their divisions. So that's a little bit of it as well that I think is another consideration, so. All right, other comments on that particular issue? The other piece in there is that the president receives basically, 20% of the weekly fee for being, the ex officio mayor. How do we think about
$20,
that?
not percent.
Yeah.
Well, it's
$20.
It's 20%.
Or does it say percentage?
Yeah, it's $20 out of $100.
Oh, I see, I got you, okay.
So I don't know if that translates or not, but I wanted
Yes,
to
I
talk a
gotcha.
little bit about how we think about that.
It should be a percentage, I think, of the 100. If we go up to 300, then it would be, just say a percentage of 20% of the.
So you just bring the scale, would
Extra
go ride right with
bucks.
it?
It makes sense to, if that's how people valued it before.
Okay. What others think of that?
I buy into that.
I would say that that's how it should be written, though, is instead of doing the dollar amount,
Yeah,
just say
percentage.
20% of whatever
Yeah.
the base commissioner paid.
I would have cut it to 10, but.
Duffy, are we like taking notes on all this stuff?
Yep.
And like, are we gonna come back and like
Yes.
say, and vote on it, like we're on subject 6, S6 here?
100%.
We're gonna do $1,000 and PRS and out the door type
Yeah,
of thing?
so,
All right.
what I was trying to articulate at the beginning, and I will bear repeating, is this is about finding out where, like, and I think if you look at the first 6 or 7 things we've gone through, we've all I kind of, and I hope you do too, you have a sense of where we have a broad consensus. And that's what I think we need to use these early meetings to do. And then after we get through everything, those items that we've had that broad consensus on, then we need to come back and we can get more information where we want it, make sure that we have the full input, and then have the final consensus. So that's why I don't want to get down to where, I was sitting there thinking to myself, God, I don't want to go in there tonight and just say, well, here's what we're saying about the city commission, So we got to let it breathe a little bit, but I think we got to keep narrowing the issues down, and at the end, we'll be ready to have a discussion like, okay, here are the priority items that we need to reach final consensus on. So that would be the process. Is everybody comfortable
We're
with
down
that?
to the 6 or 7, and then we say, okay, here's what we're
Yes.
voting on.
Yes, 100%.
Instead of doing it piecemeal, everything, and then we said, what did we vote on 2 weeks ago?
You will get lost,
Yeah.
right? And then it won't be as productive as these conversations so far, I think, have been, so that's good. Okay, anything else on salary and bonds? Okay, if not,
Is $5,000 bond enough?
I was thinking that should the bond reflect the salary? Or
that's,
closer, if we say $1,000 a month, should they be bonded then at $12,000?
I mean,
It should be
that's,
adjusted with the salary.
Right.
if that's what it was intended, I don't know what the original history, but it feels like that's a logical conclusion. So we can put that down to bond for further discussion.
It might be helpful to have someone with background knowledge speak to,
Financing.
Yeah, what's the purpose of the bond?
purpose, why was it $5,000 to begin with?
Yep. Agreed. Okay. All right, number 7 is the president, the duties of the president of the city commission.
The one thing I wrote in the paragraph here is qualified. It says the president of the city commission shall be recognized as the official government head. and he or she may take command of the police and govern take command of the police and government the city by proclamation during times of public danger and emergency. Like, is that person qualified to do that?
That was, I saw that in the notes from the last go around, so.
Man, somebody's got to do it.
I found that kind of funny myself, but, I mean, it just seems like somebody that we have plenty of qualified people, administrators within the city to take command of the.
Yeah, more like
Yeah.
city manager.
I think that's more to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm the mayor, I need to talk to FEMA or martial law or,
Yeah, because it can be undone by 4 members of the
Yeah.
city commission can go in and say, so I do think it's for exigent circumstances, so they can immediately, well, we're watching that play out right now across the country. People need that authority in order to kind of, unleash resources and things like that. So I think that's what it's for, and then you do have the backup of the commissioners can come in and say, wait, whoa, what's going on here? So that's the political check.
I read that and quite couldn't comprehend all of that, but.
I would think it should be more for the city manager to make that decision as opposed to the president of the council, or maybe the city manager and the chief of police. I don't like that myself, just the
Yeah,
president.
it was a point of debate the last time. I had a question on that. Can you remember when has this happened? Like, I would be curious as to the circumstances when this would happen and how it actually played out.
My knowledge, not since I have been here, no.
Okay.
It would have to be horrible. It would be like a tornado hit City Hall while they were all at work, and you
Yeah.
knew, it's not.
Yeah, well, designated survivor scenario, yeah.
That happened, does the council president know who to call? I just don't think they have that knowledge.
But if we
that's where I'm
if
at
we
with
give the manager that control, we've got no way to take it away from him, at least with
I think it
the,
should be 3 people, not just the manager.
but with having the president of the commission be in charge and with the authority of 4 other commissioners can say, hey, wait a minute, you're going out of bounds here. I think that's our safety valve.
As opposed to the city manager.
Yeah, I think that it is, as Mr. Berquist said, it's that emergency, the catastrophic situation, and I would think the one thing, the city manager appeals to me, except for, I think the other part of it is that in that time of trouble, the elected official, that the people have elected to be there and not the appointed official takes charge. I mean, and they have been in a position as the ambassador and the spokesman to the community. And so they're gonna need to get out there and be the calming voice. That's kind of, I think that's why it's in there, but I'm not sure that's right, but I think that's why.
Might be in the bomb shelter.
So, what's that?
You might be in the bomb shelter.
Well, the president could also say that whoever was left in the city, put it back on them if there was somebody capable.
Yeah.
It doesn't,
Yeah.
they can make the right decision at that point.
Yeah, and they do have to answer to the rest of the commissioners. They can override them and say that isn't an emergency or.
And if the president is incapacitated, who says it then?
VP.
Probably the vice president.
Vice
Yeah.
President.
Yeah.
Vice President does.
Yeah.
Yeah, it says vice president. In the absence of the vice president, the other members of the city commission shall select.
So it is an Armageddon scenario,
Right.
right? And maybe
Kind
the
of.
other reason to divide the
Coronavirus finally
authority a
gets
little
here.
bit is the city manager would need to execute on the emergency plans, right? Once they set the course, they need that person focusing on keeping the city apparatus running while the other person kind of makes those larger calls, so. And then, as I came back to, has this ever happened? From a perspective of, like, does it need to be addressed and get on the ballot and, some of this is antiquated in terms of how it portrays itself, but, I mean, I think this is, similar to how other governments would handle, that hierarchy of emergency, so. Others want to weigh in on that one?
I just think it should be more than one person.
Any other comments on that one? All right. Municipal bonds, Section 8. And again, just kind of going back and reminding ourselves, any comments that people are raising about the issuance of bonds by the city or how they're, or that authority or any limitations on it, or anything that you have that you want to bring to the group on that issue. Okay, nothing? No takers on the bonds? Okay. Okay, the city commission clerk and the employees of the city commission. One question, are you the only, are there other employees of the commission that
So the city
directly work for them, or?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, so the city manager and I are the only employees direct reports to the
Okay.
city commission.
Okay, good. All right, so, is there any comments on that? On this provision, or, other than Kelly, you're doing a fantastic job, so. Beyond that, yes.
Curious, what determines your salary? Does the city manager determine that, or?
No, the city commission determines. and
City
sets
commissioners?
my
Okay.
salary, yes, and evaluates me.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, we can move off that one. We've got serious momentum here, guys.
Yeah.
10, meetings. This is the process for calling a meeting, special meetings, et cetera. And again, complying with the open meetings law, which we've already discussed. And so any input on that?
It's not something I've ever heard anybody bring up that.
I mean, that's kind of a somewhat standard. Okay. All right, nothing there, we can move on. Penalty for absence, effectively there, if you miss 3 consecutive meetings or more than half the meetings in a 90-day period, you vacate the seat. Is that tight enough? Too tight?
Has anyone ever been forced to vacate due to attendance? Has this ever come into effect where someone's been kicked off commission because they aren't
Yes,
showing up?
Mr. Chairman. Only once that I recall, and it was someone who was a city commissioner that was in the Navy and was gone for an extended period of time.
Oh,
and
I
was being
remember.
excused.
I kind of
Yeah.
remember that, yeah.
Dave Stein.
Dave, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
They did continue to excuse him, and he was able to keep his seat. But it went into, from weeks to months to years. There was some discussion about
Dave
making it at that time or not continuing to excuse him. He would stay on, as I recall.
He got called away, actually, if I remember right.
Yes,
Yeah,
he was called into.
he got called away.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's
Not
probably
like
in his
battle,
better
but
judgment to let go
in
than
charge.
it is to,
Mhm.
yeah.
That brings up a point that it's more of a question when I was reading this. So does that mean with the majority of a vote of them excusing it, there's unlimited absences allowed as long as your
long as you're
your
excused.
peers excuse you?
Correct.
I don't know if we maybe need a check on that at some
Well,
point.
actually, that situation that was just described, there started to be mounting political pressure on the commissioners to
Yeah, to
continuing
not-
to excuse him,
yeah.
as I remember it.
Yes, that's
So
correct.
that's the check, that the public
The
says,
public
what are
will
you
say.
doing? I mean, you have to make a decision, but beyond that,
So,
Is there a contingency for health issues if someone has a serious health issue or operation or something like that?
So that's happened in recent years as well, and that commissioner was excused for a few months and then ended up resigning because of those health issues.
Yeah, I remember that.
So, Mr. Growe, so, as long as the commissioners continue to excuse them,
You gotta be compassionate about things like that, and then you gotta lay down the hammer when you have to.
Yeah.
I mean, that's up to the
case by
commissioner.
case.
Okay, I'm just asking.
yeah, that's within their discretion. That might be valid or not valid. Somebody just, yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on that one? Feel strongly about? I mean, you have to deal with that somehow, is, if this is, it feels like it's adequate, we
I
will.
think this allows them to deal with their own issue if they know what's,
Yeah.
they're the one doing the double duty if somebody's not showing up.
Right, yeah, fair point, so.
I don't think it's worth going to the ballot. I was just curious if there was a check on how many excused absences you can have, but you made a good point with politically being accountable to the
And believe me, it did
community.
become a political issue.
Yeah.
Because I think I was still here when that was going on, when Dave was on there.
Yes,
So-
because I think the public was urging them to not excuse him so that he would be forced off.
So that's what they get paid the big bucks for, is
Right.
dealing with those political issues like that.
Fun stuff.
Okay, 12.
Oops,
Yep,
sorry.
there we go.
Thank you.
Okay, on this one again, any commentary you're hearing from the community or any commentary that you want to offer this group tonight concerning this section 12? And this is where the vote of 4 members, the majority of the body, as opposed to the majority of the people at the meeting.
It's fine.
I think it's fine
Yeah,
too.
happy with that? That actually, that's I think, a pretty good provision, but any other comments on it? I won't belabor it, but if anybody wants to speak up. Okay,
They were 5 for 5.
all right, let's go, we're rolling, all right? 13. Okay, another kind of technical one. Any comments on the procedure for ordinance enactment?
I think this kind of ties into 14.
Yeah.
With emergency measures, and I know that there has been discussion in the past about everything seems to be an emergency resolution, and why.
Yeah, I would agree. Why don't you pop 14 up there too, because I do agree these are kind of tied together.
I don't know what constitutes an emergency, basically, is,
Smaller?
I guess.
Sorry, I'm not that.
It does define that in 14,
It does, but
but it seems to be pretty
seems to be
all-encompassing,
everything,
I
yes.
suppose, right?
Yes, yes.
There you go.
It says no
So,
measures.
so let me elevate up for 1 second. Other than, we've got emergency put on the table as part of this overall discussion. So if holding that aside for a second, are there any other issues with the ordinance enactment that we want to discuss tonight? Or should we focus our attention on the emergency aspect of how passage is achieved?
I think 13's not controversial.
Okay. So we can go to it includes in there a reference to the emergency, which is covered in 14. So let's move to 14 then and discuss that a little bit. Mrs. Corso, do you want to provide a little bit more of what you're hearing about that issue since you started this thread? We'll give you the
Well,
mic first.
What I'm hearing is that everything seems to be an emergency resolution, and why is that? And does the wording need to be changed so that you don't have to say it's an emergency all the time? I don't really know what the legalities of ordinances are. I don't know what revised code says. I don't know that.
Just to make a recommendation on this, not that I want to stifle discussion, but because I have a few questions right off the bat. This is happening quite a bit. Why is it happening? Because it lists, we're talking about, well, what constitutes an emergency? Any emergency measure in ordinance, blah, blah, blah. Public peace, property, health, safety, or providing the usual daily operation of the municipal department. So what is happening apparently on a frequent basis that puts it into one of those measures? Because it doesn't seem like there are many emergencies that affect the public peace, property, health, safety. I know that there was mention last meeting about expenditures of a very small amount needing council action or commission action in order to pass them. Is that why? Or do we want to tie this conversation to the conversation that's going to happen in section 25?
Yeah, I think that's I do think
Yeah.
they're connected,
So-
in my opinion.
The
they are.
dollar amount that's causing the
$10,000.
emergency.
The emergency, that they need this dollar amount to keep this
Yeah.
department, going for the next 2 weeks, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyway, I say all that to say, can we, through Ms. Cresser, bring in someone to speak to why specifically, or what is the most frequent cause for a piece of legislation to be deemed an emergency?
I think that's a good suggestion.
Yeah, I agree. I'd love to hear that.
And part of it too is if you look at the ordinance enactment, the ordinance, it's got to be read at 2 regular meetings,
Right.
Right.
no less than 1 week apart. And so there's an extended process for passing an ordinance. And so the things that you say, like the practical realities, are, I think, a part of what's driving it. But I think the best spokespeople to that would be the people that are actually impacted by it, which would be the.
It's 2 regular meetings and then 30 days after, right?
Yeah,
So it's almost 2 months basically from.
exactly.
A vendor.
I think that's a big driver of what's going on, but we should let them speak for themselves.
I don't want to jump ahead, but Kelly, was that the same, or are we talking about the same thing when they mentioned the $10,000? I think, again, Eric had mentioned it, that they had to get approval or something to sign anything, and
why it's an
other
emergency.
municipalities are upwards of 15 or something along that lines. Is that the same thing we're talking about here?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct.
They're intertwined. So why don't we have them come in on both of those issues, since we would see them as combined? And we put that under city administration and ease of administration versus the message that kind of goes out to the public when, like, people say, everything's an emergency. Well, is it really
Do you know
an
what
administrative
section that one was
aspect,
in?
and there's a better way to handle that, I guess?
Which section that?
As
one
someone who
about
works for the government,
$10,000 was in?
I don't-
Our
I
limit
haven't
at
read
Perkins,
that
I
yet.
think, is
I know
50,000.
he mentioned it.
So we don't
Yeah.
have to do any of these emergency, we don't have to bid things out. It's a whole different system. But I can understand why this would happen all the time, because we have things come up, properties we have to buy, and we would have to do an emergency resolution every time.
Okay.
I can understand easily how this would happen all the time. And the limit probably should be raised. That's probably what's
Is that-
happening, I assume.
Yes.
But it happens, I would say, every meeting we have, we probably would have an emergency resolution.
So, okay, so we can bring that back to be discussed. We can park that unless anybody else, and we'll bring the folks in that are impacted. Thanks for that input from the administrative side of the government, so that kind of buttresses what others were kind of suspecting. So, okay. That takes us to 15, record and publication. Okay. Okay, this is, basically got to put it in the paper, let everybody know
Yeah.
what's going on. So,
Whose rule, that can cost a lot of money, putting it in the paper when you can get it via the email or via your website or via anything else. Short of funding the Sandusky Register, I don't know what value it has, because do they even put that on their webpage when we?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
Yes,
so
it is.
the e-paper is online. So in that sense, yes, it's
It would
online,
be
it's accessible by going to the e-paper and reading
Well,
it,
you
all
have
the
to
legal
purchase
ads.
the e-paper,
Yes, you
Yeah.
would have to purchase
it's
it,
not the free one. You have to-
correct.
You used to have a strong demographics in this area that read the newspaper. And I'm old school, I gotta hold that paper.
I read it every single morning,
Yeah.
same way you do, but,
I don't get
So,
mine
I
at
mean, this is
5:30,
a lot of
so-
money we're talking there,
morning.
put out for them.
is this,
Little
is this,
outdated for.
is this one of those same sort of issues that we need to kind of?
Oh, yeah, I know there is.
Because the
I don't get it. I don't
distribution
get there anymore.
network that, so many people rely on, and it crashes into the, kind of the onslaught of the, information being everywhere. Is this something that maybe we should look and see how other communities have wrestled with this, and see if there's anything there that we could look at to potentially modernize it, but not try to kind of reinvent the wheel all on our own? This make sense for a next step in this one?
Good with that.
Yeah.
What are other communities
Probably
doing?
so, because we still have a large segment of the population that is not online, cannot operate a computer or cell phone or what have you. And so perhaps in 5 years, this will get amended, but I don't see it changing now.
So, Mr. Chairman, in addition to that, I apologize, I'm not prepared to give you this tonight, but I did, since the last charter review, I have done a spreadsheet that shows each year and what ordinances have been published in the paper and the cost to them.
I have that.
So
Printed it.
I have that for us. And just as an example,
Printed it. Hold on.
when the state of Ohio, a couple of years ago, changed how cities administer income tax, we follow their code. We had to change and codify our ordinances to match theirs. And it was done twice, I believe, in an 18-month period of time. And each of those ads cost us over $7,000.
Ouch.
So each year is different. Each year, it's higher or lower depending on, what passes and what's codified, because those are the ones that are published. But I'll send that out to you as well.
Okay.
Is there any state guidance? Like, is there any minimums that we have to meet on this topic?
Kelly? Oh, go ahead.
Like, does the state mandate that we publish via the news? So this is just what we're telling ourselves to do. We're not using this to fall into compliance.
No.
Okay.
Not that I'm aware of. I can double check, but no, I don't believe so.
You sent us, June 2nd, 2015, the Charter Review Committee minutes actually has that chart, if this is the correct chart with regard to the price for the publications,
So that would be probably the one that I prepared for them.
2010 to 2014.
But I've done one since.
Oh, okay.
So I've done one between 2015
Oh, the
and
current,
2020.
gotcha.
That's the one I'm going to send you.
Perfect. Well, this is
Thank you, though.
a lot.
What does that
Even
number
looking at
say?
this.
I was gonna say, what are those 5 years?
So it's from 2010 to 2014. Do you want all of the numbers?
Just how much?
Okay,
Yeah, round.
so the last recorded, 2014, $8,651.10.
They tell you my advertising budget's twice that.
It's about $100 per publication, right? Something like that.
It's based on the.
Column inch.
Column.
Column inches.
The more space you take, the more money it is. A lot of those things are a whole page.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, the cost to advertise the codified legislation was almost $9,000.
Would you be able to publish what the ordinance is about and say, if you want to read the whole thing, you may get that at the city manager's office or something? Or do you have to publish it?
This would have to change to accomplish that.
You're right.
Okay.
And that's why I say, well, how are other people taking advantage of technology? So, and section 16 is price and mode of publication, which we're supposed to get the best prices, basically. And so I think that goes in with 15. Right? So 15 and 16 would be, let's look and see how other communities are managing that.
Adriana.
Does that make sense?
What's 16?
Okay. I mean, I think that 15 and 16 kind of go together as well.
Yes, you do.
I print everything. I'm a note taker, can you tell?
Okay, so that gets us through, because we got on a hot streak there. I didn't think we were gonna get all 16 of them, but we're through it.
All right, it's 7 o'clock.
We've given ourselves some homework.
Slow start.
And Kelly, you'll provide the minute, give me, remind me, when did the minutes come out for this group? How long after the meeting should set our expectations, I guess?
So, normal circumstances?
Yeah.
I would say that within a 3-day period prior to the next meeting.
Okay,
3 days prior, I will send out an agenda for the upcoming meeting and the minutes from the previous meeting for your approval.
Okay, okay, and we understand that you have some other responsibilities that need tending to, so that's fine, we'll remind ourselves of that. So, okay, and so on the, on the form of government, we're going to get more information on that, yeah, you know, from experts. We're gonna have people come in and tell us about that. On the qualifications, we're gonna do a little bit more research around how are other communities handling that, what's the state law look like in that regard. Section 14 and 25, we're gonna invite the city in to talk to us about the emergency and its connection to the approval process for expenditures. Sections 15 and 16, we just talked about, you know, publication, again, we'll look at other communities to determine, you know, if there's a modernization, opportunity there that we might want to take advantage of it at some point. Let me see here. On the qualifications, it sounded like, you know, 3 years to 18 months, we had a broad consensus. Again, I'm not saying we're saying yes to this, but that's what I had in my notes. And so we had that, and then on the city, the pay for the city commissioners, we had a good discussion around that. I think the general impression is that should be improved, that there should be a floor to allow them to qualify for the retirement fund, and that there should be an indexing function or a review, some periodic way to ensure that it's keeping pace, is where I thought we came out from a consensus perspective. It felt like the amount was between like 9 and 13,000-ish. To be continued for sure, but just as in a summary, those are the things I feel like that we kind of circled around tonight. So, did I miss anything? All right, Kelly will have the minutes, so if I did, you can call me on that. All right, so with that, there is no old business, so I'll go around and just ask if there's anything else that anyone wants to offer to the group this evening that we've not covered that you would like to bring up.
No, I don't have anything to offer. I would like to hear from the city staff about how they think the government currently is functioning under its current form and system. So I don't know if we do that the same day that we get all of the information regarding the ward versus the current system we have, but I think that that's important information. So I'd like to hear from them as well.
Okay.
Who is them is up to.
Who is them?
All of, yeah.
It's 200
But who would that
City
be?
staff, I mean, we can nail that down. If you have any people you would like to hear from, I can hear from whoever. I just think that hearing a little bit about, for people who actually work in this city every day, how they feel like it operates before we change the form of government is important.
Okay. I think they're going to want to be here to hear what what the other guys have to say. So I think they'll have a keen interest and probably an opinion. So I think that's good to make sure they're on the list. Okay, anything else? All right. The other item was new business, which I would think that what we just talked about would cover that, but I'll open it up one last time. All right, well, we've got our first meeting under the belt, so thank you. I hope that everybody feels like they had an opportunity to participate and speak their minds, and that's what this is all about. And it's about input and consensus building so that we can ultimately make a recommendation to the City Commission on key items for their consideration and ultimately the consideration of the citizens. So with that,
What's our
motion
homework? What's our homework and when's the
Oh,
next meeting?
good point, sorry, Kurt. I think that when I was looking at, if you look at the
Kid that asks for
table
homework.
of contents, that's the first time in your life you've ever asked for homework. But thank you, thank you.
Well, I want to know what I have to do.
So I think that what worked in this, I think we just take the next title, which is administrative officers and departments. And that's 17 through 34. And so I think we use the table of contents of the charter to give us topically. We'll work through it again in a similar fashion. If we don't get all the way to the end, we'll bump it and that'll be our homework for the next meeting.
And our next meeting is April 6th.
That's, yes.
I seen that, I just know we
April
had
6th
left it up for
At 5:15.
change based on,
So it's now always 5:15, not 5:12?
It is the 6th.
On my brain, on my train, on my five.
We put it at 5:15 because there was another meeting in.
17 through, what did you say?
So I had actually asked,
it's right, it's
I'll let sent this out.
exactly the chunk.
Oh, I see,
Meeting
okay.
today was
So
at 5:15
administrative.
because of another
Mhm.
one, but there's not a conflict on April 6th, so we can start at 5.
5 o'clock.
Fine.
We can start at 5, okay. So April 6th at
Misunderstood
5
what I was-
o'clock.
Hey, Bill, 3 minutes?
What's that?
3 minutes?
Oh.
Public comment.
We forgot his finish.
Do you want 3 more minutes?
Yeah, okay. Well, that's what you talked about, let the
Yeah,
public in here.
yeah.
I just want to give a little bit of background on past attempts to change the charter. When they changed term limits, the way it was explained in a letter to residents 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was, the explanation we received was that there was a city commissioner that's on the commission now that was appointed to fill a vacant seat 2 years in. He ran again, which would have given him 6 years, but he couldn't run again because it would be over the 8-year limit. That was the explanation that we were given. It had nothing to do with, stability and everybody was doing a great job on the commission. It had to do with a problem that was created. And then that's why they put it into the charter to give you 4-year terms. The other issue is with the change to the ward system would not mean an increase in commission seats. We could still have the continued 7. You would have 4 at ward, 3 at large, which still gives me an opportunity. If I live in the West End, I talk to my ward representative, it still gives me an opportunity to talk to 3 more commissioners that are at large, okay? I don't really think that you're going to have a stalemate on voting on issues because the guy that represents the West End didn't get his way in the West End. You're not going to have gridlock. I'm sorry, you're just not going to have gridlock. On the emergency measures, boy, they've got that one little clause in there that says a whole bunch of things cannot be passed as an emergency: transfer of property, sale of property, purchase of property, but then it says unless there's an emergency. What I'm getting at here is if the city commissioner, the city manager wants to sell Washington Park, that should never be an emergency. There should be some kind of clause saying that the sale of property, whether it be Battery Park, Washington Park, the city boat ramp, any public property should not be up for an emergency measure vote. Because folks, what an emergency measure vote does is it takes the public process right out of the decision. If a sale of Battery Park is passed as an emergency, there is no avenue for referendum or initiative or any type of a petition to be circulated by the citizens of Sandusky asking for a vote of that decision. Publications, 15 and 16.
1 minute warning.
I'm
Just
sorry.
being-
Yeah, okay, yeah.
I'm just being polite, 1
Okay,
minute.
thank you very
Yep.
much, I appreciate that. This is an older community. The city put it on the ballot, I think, a few years ago to do away with that Sandusky Register thing, and it failed so you might want to look at the past history
Yep.
of what failed and what was approved previously in recent memory. Thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate your input. Okay. Yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about that on other things too. The history of what's already happened is really important, as a piece of information.
Get
So
off
it's
the
part of the
wheel.
homework. So, okay, so our homework is administrative officers and departments, sections 17 through 34. And we'll be back here on Monday, April 6th of 2020 at 5 p.m. And just as a reminder for the public, we will start the session with input from the public with a 3-minute limitation, and we can end the session in the same fashion. So with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And stuff.